paid for sister's wedding, sold car and savings, then she cut me off after marriage, leaving me homeless while parents said sacrifice was expected and love did not mean I deserved help back during hard winter nights of hunger, fear, shame, pain. Memory hits me first, not the cold, not the hunger, but the sound of my sister laughing in her white dress while I stood in the back of the hall counting the minutes until I could get out of there because I had already sold my car that morning and my phone was running on dead battery power, and I had no idea how I was going to get home. My name is Kieran Holt. I was 28 years old then. I was a man who had always believed that family meant you emptied your pockets and your future if that was what love required. I remember that night feeling like the music was turned up too loud for the lie I was telling myself. This is what it is. This is what it's all about. This is what it's all about. I told myself. This is what I want. I want this. She will remember. Everyone will. I come from the kind of town where the sky is gray all winter, where the factories shut down, where houses have paint that flakes off, where everyone knows everyone, where everyone lives life in relation to the storm and the layoff. I'm from Northern Ohio. I'm from the kind of town where everyone knows each other's family. My mother and father, Arden and Lissa Holt. They were in their late 50s then. My mother was tired. My father was proud. They were church on Sundays. They were working every other day. The kind of couple who told us that sacrifice was something we didn't get to choose. It was what we breathed. My sister Brinley was 4 years older than me. She was 32 years old when my brother-in-law got her. She was sharp-tongued. She was pretty. She was in a hurry all the time. When I was growing up, Brinley would braid my hair. She would whisper secrets into my ear. Then she would forget about me in the park while she was off chatting with her friends. I loved her anyway. I was the kind of kid who would go after her approval like it was a ball. When Brinley got engaged to Rowan, he was 35 then. He was the kind of man who was the personal assistant to the real estate mogul. He had big dreams. He had no money. We had family meetings. Places. Dresses. Guest lists. Numbers that didn't add up. Brinley broke down one night in tears. Mascara running down her hands. "I'm not going to go into debt just to get married," she said. My parents looked to me. I was 26 years old then, working nights for a distribution center, good pay, nothing fancy, but I had a used sedan and a savings account I'd been accumulating since I was 22, foregoing trips, foregoing dates, figuring I was being responsible. My dad cleared his throat, and my mom nodded, saying, "Sometimes love means concessions for one child over another." And I nodded, understanding. Or I thought I did. I said yes before anyone mouths the question. I sold the car 2 days later. I spent the savings in 3 cash outs. I told myself it was a phase. I told myself Brinley could help me get back on track after the wedding. She hugged me, holding me close, and said, "I will never forget this, Key." I believed her, because I wanted to. The wedding was in early October. Leaves ablaze on the ground like flames. Pictures everywhere. People applauded during their kiss. I watched my folks radiate happiness, no matter what the bill was for the place. Rowan pounded my back, calling me brother. Brinley danced. After the honeymoon, she stopped calling back. Not all at once, but piece by piece, as if she was removing snag threads from her coat. A missed call, then a delayed text message, then nothing at all. When I finally managed to get a hold of her, she was occupied with unpacking, getting settled, she said. When I asked about the cash, about possibly crashing for a bit since my lease was up and rent had increased, she exhaled, frustrated, as if this was an unreasonable request. "You have a wife now, Key," she said, and then marriage changes things. And Rowan wants space. Before finally, we should work on ourselves. I was 27 years old then. And winter came early for me, as if to echo the season of marriage for Brinley and Rowan, and the distribution center cut back hours, and then my lease was up, and then I slept in Jackson's basement for 2 weeks before he lost the couch he let me have for the nights, and then it was one couch to another, then couch surfing hell, then couch surfing hell, then no couch, then no couch. Then nights spent in a shelter with an air of disinfectant and terror, then nights spent with soup and swift smiles, then nights spent calling my folks, with my mother softly weeping into the receiver as she said, We raised you to give without expecting. My dad said, this is character building. When I said that I was hungry, my father said that fasting develops character. When I said that I was scared, my mother said that fear brings me closer to God. I was now 28, an adult, shaking on a bus bench at midnight, embarrassed that I had fallen for a promise that had never been put into writing. I met Brinley once at a grocery store. She was now 33, radiant, diamond flashing. She smiled as if we were distant cousins. She asked me how I was doing. I said that I was making it. She nodded and said that it was good. She turned around and walked away. It was then that something in me snapped, but it was not dramatic. It was just a slight movement that signaled that love wasn't an excuse for me any longer. Winter nights got colder. I figured out which gas stations had warm-up stations for your hands when you wash them. I figured out how to stretch my dollar. I figured out that pride was just an affordability issue. I also figured out that love for my family had its own set of terms. Give. Do not ask back. Be grateful for even having the opportunity to give. I have replayed that scene at the dinner table thousands of times. I pictured that kid in me saying, yes. I wanted to go back in time to shake that kid. I wish that I had said to that kid that love without feeling was just abandonment that wore lipstick. I was in love. That was the worst part of it. But love was not going anywhere. It was like that lump that had formed in my stomach when I was lying there beside Brinley. It was confusing. It was irritating. I did not know if I was going to make it through that winter. But I did know for sure that my own personal mythology about my own family was untrue. The second winter memory that stays with me is not the cold itself, but the way time stretched when no one was waiting for you. Days felt like weeks, nights felt endless, and I remember being 28 still, but feeling older, like something in me had aged faster than my body, and I was sleeping behind a closed car wash on the edge of town because the concrete blocked some wind and the owner only chased people off during daylight. I had learned routines by then. Wake before sunrise so no one called the cops. Wash my face in a gas station sink if the clerk was kind or distracted. Eat whatever I could get. Sometimes a bruised apple from a donation bin. Sometimes nothing. Hunger stops feeling sharp after a while. It turns dull, like a constant pressure behind the eyes. Shame, though, that stays sharp. I avoided mirrors. I avoided people who knew my name. I ran into my cousin Elric once. He was 24 then, still in college, wearing a clean jacket, full of energy. He asked how things were going. I told him I was between places. He nodded like he understood, but his eyes drifted, already uncomfortable. Later that day, my aunt texted my mom. I know because my mom called me crying, asking why I was embarrassing the family by telling people I was struggling. I asked her what she thought struggling looked like. She said, "We all struggle. You are just louder about it." That was when I stopped calling every day. I started calling once a week. Then less. My sister Brinley stayed silent. Rowan posted pictures online. New couch. Weekend trips. I stared at those photos on library computers until the screen blurred. I was 29 by the time I got a temporary job shoveling snow for the city. It paid cash. My hands cracked and bled. I liked the pain because it felt earned. One night, after 14 hours, I collapsed in the back room of a church that let workers sleep during storms. A volunteer named Malin, perhaps 41, brought me coffee and asked my name. When I told her, she wrote it carefully, like it mattered. That small thing almost broke me. She asked if I had family. I laughed before I could stop myself. She did not push. She said, "Sometimes family is not who you expect." That line stayed with me. Around January, I swallowed my pride and went back to my parents' house. Snow piled high. I stood on the porch for a long time before knocking. My dad answered. He looked surprised, then annoyed. He asked why I had not called first. I said I was cold. He let me in but kept the thermostat low. My mom made soup and talked about church gossip. I sat there, 29 years old, boots wet, listening to them discuss a couple who overspent on a vacation and now needed help. My mom said people need to learn consequences. I waited for someone to look at me. No one did. That night I slept on the couch. In the morning my dad told me I needed a plan. He said staying long-term would create dependency. I asked about Brinley. He said she had her own family now. I said I was her brother. He said, roles change. When I left, my mom hugged me and slipped me $40 like a secret. I felt both grateful and humiliated. Outside, the air bit my face. I realized then that I was not homeless because of one bad decision. I was homeless because the people who asked me to sacrifice did not believe that sacrifice went both ways. Weeks passed. I picked up odd jobs. I slept wherever I could. I turned 30 alone, eating a cupcake someone left in the break room of a temp agency. I made a wish I did not believe in. I stopped checking my sister's social media. I stopped expecting apologies. But anger started to grow, slow and steady. Not explosive. Clear. I replayed conversations. My parents' words. Brinley's smile in the grocery store. Hard questions at night. Would I ever have done this to her? Would love have looked different if roles were reversed? I knew the answers. That knowledge hurt more than hunger. Late February, during a storm so bad the buses stopped, I shared a blanket with a man named Orson, maybe 52, who had lost his house after medical bills. He told me something simple. People confuse obligation with love. Obligation demands. Love responds. I did not sleep that night. I thought about every demand disguised as care in my life. By the time the snow melted, something in me had shifted again. I was still broke. Still unstable. But I was done believing that suffering was proof of goodness. I started writing things down in a notebook I found. What I wanted. What I would never do again. Who I would help and how, with limits. I wrote my sister's name and drew a line under it. I did not know yet what that meant. I only knew I was changing, quietly, the way ice breaks in spring, slow but irreversible. Spring didn't fix anything. It just exposed all that winter had hidden, dirty snow piles melting into trash and regret. And I was 30 turning 31 that year, sleeping lighter, thinking harder, trying to work out how a person rebuilds when the blueprint they trusted was wrong. I found steadier work at a recycling plant, loud, exhausting, but honest, and the supervisor, a woman named Trevia, 38 then, paid attention when I showed up early and stayed late. She didn't ask about my past. She asked if I could lift 50 pounds and keep my head down. I could. I rented a room from a guy named Nalrik, 45, who talked too much and drank too much, but he wanted rent on time and nothing else. I slept on a mattress on the floor and felt rich because the door locked. The first night there I cried, not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. I started eating regularly. I gained weight. I bought a second-hand jacket that fit. I still felt the echo of hunger in my bones. Trauma teaches your body lessons your mind wants to forget. I called my parents less. When I did, conversation stayed shallow. Weather. Work. Nothing about the past. My mom asked once if I was still upset. I said I was still learning. She didn't ask what that meant. Brinley reached out in late May. A text. Just checking in. Hope you are well. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered. I thought about replying with anger. I thought about replying with jokes. I replied with truth. I said I am working in house now. I am still hurt. I need time. She didn't respond. Weeks later I heard from my dad that she was pregnant. He said it like a peace offering. As if new life erased old harm. I said congratulations and meant it in a distant way, like congratulating a stranger. My parents invited me to a barbecue. I went. Brinley was there, 34 then, glowing, belly round, everyone careful around her. Rowan shook my hand. We talked about the weather. Brinley hugged me lightly. She whispered, "We need to talk sometime." I nodded. We did not talk that day. To watch everyone celebrate felt surreal. I saw how seamlessly the family reconfigured itself around whoever needed protection. I saw who that was never. I left early. The drive home, I wasn't angry. I was clear. Clarity is lonely. Summer brought overtime. I banked money. I started therapy at a sliding scale clinic. My therapist, Joran, maybe 50, didn't rush me. He asked what I thought love required. I told him what I'd learned. He asked where that had gotten me. I laughed, then didn't anymore. We talked about boundaries. About chosen family. About grief that comes from living people. I named it. I grieved the sister I'd been told I had. I grieved the parents I needed. Naming it helped. In August, Brinley asked to meet. Coffee shop. Neutral ground. She was 35 then. I was 31. She talked about pregnancy fears. About finances. About how marriage was harder than she expected. I listened. When she asked how I'd been, I told her. Not everything. Enough. I told her about the car. The savings. The nights outside. The hunger. She cried. She said she didn't realize it was that bad. I asked how was that possible when I told her I had nowhere to go. She said she thought I'd figure it out. She said our parents said I was strong. I told her strength is not an excuse to abandon someone. She said she never asked me to do all that. I said she accepted it. It sat between us, silent. People ordered drinks. She said finally she couldn't help me now, financially. Baby coming. Mortgage. I nodded. I hadn't asked her to. I'd asked for acknowledgement. She said sorry. It sounded practiced. I said sorry without repair does not rebuild trust. She asked what I wanted. I said honesty and accountability. She said she needed time. We left with hugs that felt like habit, not healing. I did not cry after. I felt lighter. Boundaries do that. In the fall, I moved to a small studio. I was 32 then. I bought a cheap couch. I cooked for myself. I invited Nalrik over once out of politeness, and never again. I started volunteering at the church that had let me sleep during storms. I handed out blankets. I learned names. I learned stories. I met people who had been crushed by systems and silence. I saw myself in them and did not look away. My parents asked why I was so distant. I said I was protecting my progress. My dad said family should come first. I said self-respect should come first. He did not like that. Neither did my mom. They said I was holding grudges. I said I was holding truths. Winter approached again. The first cold night, I stayed in, warm, and thought about the year before. The bench. The fear. I did not feel grateful in the way movies show. I felt sober. Survival changes you. I did not want revenge. I wanted integrity. Brinley had her baby in December. A boy. They named him something I will not repeat here. I sent a gift. Books. No note. She sent a thank you text. That was enough. I realized then that reconciliation does not always look like closeness. Sometimes it looks like distance without hatred. I slept well that night. At 32, I had established a pace that wouldn't have been considered comfortable for anyone else but me and could certainly be called mine. Rented a small apartment above a laundromat, 1 bedroom, low ceilings, and heating units that clicked on and off like a pulse. The walls were thin, and the pipes creaked, but it was warm and affordable. On time, every time, rent was paid, and a start was made on saving, a germ of the savings lost before, and though it was only a start, it felt like growth, like the first sprouts pushing through the soil, shoots of a new, possibly sturdy stalk. Steady employment at the recycling plant had been established. Trevia trusted me enough to cover shifts in her absence, and the small, secret pride that swelled within me had absolutely, totally, and completely to do with me and had absolutely, totally, and completely nothing to do with others' approval. Brinley was, as ever, on my mind, the decisions that led me through those bitter winters, the dark and the cold, and the first snowy mornings, counting the flakes on the sidewalks because there was literally nothing else to do. Sometimes, wondering if she ever thought of me, wondering how the sacrifices she had accepted were already forgotten in the rearview mirror. Then, encountering her images on the internet, laughing, rosy-cheeked, and sporting her baby, and feeling the pinch, but not the burning hunger. The lessons of the past 2 years had brought an understanding between longing and need, and theirs was the difference, the chasm between the two. That spring, took a small trip out of state, an out-of-the-way spot in the backwoods where it was quiet enough to think. The bus took me deeper into the state, past the rivers and the closed factories like those from back in the day, and marveled at the simplicity of freedom, a carry-on bag, a bus ticket, and most important, not a single expectation from anyone. Made the acquaintance of a man named Corvin, 36, in the same hostelry. He, too, had been through hell, bankruptcy, divorce, and kids who wouldn't speak to him, But he held on to hope in the only way that, in the end, truly mattered, and not in the unrealistic, fairy tale way we imagine in our youth and early 20s. Spent many dinners and conversations about survival and pride and what, in the end, love is, and he listened without the condemnation, asked the questions that made me question, and by the time the return bus was due, realized, finally, that there was enough in me, to start teaching myself how to grasp other emotions besides the anger and the embarrassment. The summer brought the days long and wet. I painted the walls of my apartment a bright color, bought curtains, and learned how to prepare meals that were nourishing both for my body and for my ego. I called my parents from time to time, brief calls, formal. I never brought up Brinley unless asked directly. I had managed to refashion the life I had built into a reality in which I no longer required or accepted apologies for the right to exist. I remember one evening walking back from the factory and noticing a kid, 19 years at most, sitting on a stoop, shivering under a thin jacket. His hunger and fear were etched on his face like one of those trivial paperback books I used to read. I handed him a few dollars I had on me and a sandwich, one I had made for myself for dinner. He looked at me aghast, and I could feel a rush of needing to look out for this kid because I had logged many nights such as this one. I turned back home and decided on a new course of reflection and positive change. That night, I slept on a thin mattress and thought of Brinley, no longer with resentment but with a sense of perspective. Maybe our relationship could never be what we once thought we had hoped it could or should be. Maybe our families could never truly grasp the full import and implications of our words and our needs. But I understood how I could keep on living and how I could start and keep on taking care of myself before anyone or anything else. A few months later, early winter, I got a text from Brinley. "Hope you're well." I read it off and then deleted it without replying. These were words I no longer feared or cherished or needed. These words were no longer ones of love and landing safely in someone else's embrace. No, now I knew a love truly meant nothing if it left one cold and alone in the darkness. I bought a used coat and hugged the thing and stepped out into the falling snow, feeling warm and secure because I knew I had made it. I had left behind the homeless condition, the condition of the desperate, and the less understood and underappreciated sacrifices I had made and should have made and could have made and should have made. I had learned this. Real love should never leave one shivering and alone in the dark. I stood in the winter snow and then allowed myself a small grin.